Welcome back to the show. It's time for the week in review, and it's going to blow you away. Let's not waste any time. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. As promised, we're sitting here. It's Black Swan Capitalist Vershawn Vandell. How we doing?
Doing great. Glad to be here. Always good to talk with you and my brother.
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Brad. I really appreciate you having us on for the second time, and we both greatly appreciate the opportunity to engage with you. We follow your work very closely, and I have to say, you are one of the few in this space who has truly made an impact. So I commend you for that.
Hey, man, thank you so much. And the kind words really mean a lot to me. And let me tell you something. I'm impressed with you two. And it's one of the, I said this off camera and I'm going to share it right now. I don't get to follow other YouTubers, but when I see, like, you'll see clips online like everybody else will, little highlighted clips or segments and stuff. And I'm like, man, do I wish I could sit down and talk to those guys for about 10 hours, And then that's what gave me the idea to take the week in review show we were doing in our private group and say, hey, why don't I bring it to the channel and then engage a lot of the other influencers and help elevate the community, as well as selfishly get to have those conversations with you guys that I otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So I thank you guys so much for being here. And speaking of which, we got a lot to talk about, and I know we're in a down market. We're waiting for some very key critical things to take place. But let's talk and start at the SEC versus Ripple case. We know we're waiting to see if the SEC appeal. What are your thoughts here?
You go first, Mandel, please.
Well, personally, if I had to guess, I don't think there's going to be an appeal. Yes, and I think they're just dragging this on, as I said before on your show and previously, that they're trying to buy time as we speak right now. There's a lot of developments. The fundamentals have not changed. As a matter of fact, the fundamentals have just expanded. More development is growing, more partnerships. They're extending their reach across the globe. And a lot that we don't even have access to in terms of information. Just what we see and what we learned is extremely optimistic for Ripple and their digital asset XRP. And it looks positive, extremely optimistic. The fundamentals have not changed. And that's only what we see on the surface. Imagine all the non-disclosure agreements in place that the executives have, that the company has, things developing in the background that they can't speak about. I mean, just alone what we see on the surface really speaks volumes, in my opinion. And I think it's just a waiting game at this point and an opportunity to accumulate a digital asset that's extremely undervalued. I mean, ultimately, we know where this is going. They want to target all the money.
So really quickly before we go to Vershawn, I want to get his opinion on this too. But you said you don't see this going to appeal. So Vandell, tell us why specifically you don't see this going to appeal. Is it because the SEC is going to be handcuffed if they lose the appeal? Or is it because of government and them potentially saying they're going to put legislation through before the election?
I do agree with you. I think personally, my belief behind that is because I feel like the SEC doesn't have much on Ripple, to be honest, right now. The only thing they have on their side is time.
Yeah.
And they're trying to exhaust that tactic as much as possible at this given time. But that can only go on for so long because things need to change, and things are changing regardless whether they interfere or not. So I think the SEC has their hands tied behind their back. I think they were pulling every card they possibly can. If there is an appeal, then it's just going to be more waiting in the process. But ultimately, I think Ripple is going to be the success in this entire outcome. And the SEC is going to be put in their place at some point in time. And we've seen this throughout history. They've went after many innovative technologies and companies that are disrupting sectors all around the world, whether it was Tesla, Netflix, Uber, Google, Microsoft. I mean, literally the list goes on. And interestingly, each one of those companies and technologies brought something to the table that disrupted the economy and sectors globally. So Ripple's doing the same thing with the banking sector and payments. So it's just a matter of time. But that's why I don't think they're going to do anything. I think they're just stuck in a position where, as I said, they only have time on their side right now. And if they do, it's just going to be a little more waiting, but the outcome ultimately will be extremely positive for anybody that's a a Ripple investor, as well as for the executives, it would be very positive. But this will get us closer to regulatory clarity and more regulations, which ultimately will slow down the volatility of this entire market that we've seen in the long run. So the chances are now, not waiting to the last minute for the optimistic news to come out, because there's a possibility that a lot of these digital assets, particularly XRP, will almost be unattainable for a lot of people once that time comes, once utility kicks in, global adoption. So I think the time and opportunities that we have presented today will not be available in the future.
Verson, what are your thoughts when it comes to the SEC versus Ripple case? Appeal, no appeal, and why, if so or not?
Sure. So first of all, I agree with everything my brother said. But in my view, personally, the notion of an appeal is nothing more than a distraction. And whether it happens or not is completely irrelevant. The value of Ripple lies in its global network, which is already deeply integrated and interconnected with global financial institutions around the world. And on top of that, just to put more note, is the SEC's jurisdiction is only limited to the United States. And if they don't adopt what the rest of the world has already adopted and is embracing, it's going to be the US who suffers the most. And this ties us into really what's happening with the Brics currency. It's gaining traction regardless of what the mainstream media here in the West are trying to tell their people. The SEC can't hinder the progress without causing harm to their own investors and our own country. The financial technology like this is this financial technology is inevitable to take over the global financial system. The US may resist it now, but eventually we're going to be forced to address a very unsustainable debt situation, which is perpetuated by war, fought in our name, by the way. So we're killing people in our name. And the SEC lacks the power or the means to slow this down and the momentum. In fact, if you look at what's happening, the pace is only accelerating as our financial system continues to deteriorate. So the ongoing discussion, what you see on X and many other YouTube channels out there around an appeal, in my opinion, is completely unnecessary, and it's filled with like baseless claims. We've already won. People forget that the law and the facts have been on our side from the very beginning. So it's crucial to remember also that XRP and Ripple are separate entities. So the SEC's actions also have no real effect and bearing on XRP itself. And as for the Brics nations, as they move forward with their gold-backed currency, which is a real development happening in real time, it's clear that everything we've been talking about is just falling into place globally, even as they fall apart here in the West. So it's becoming increasingly clear. It's very obvious to anyone who's really paying attention. And I just wanted to share those thoughts. So sorry for taking too much time, guys.
No.
There's just a lot of contributing factors, right?
A lot of contributing factors, and it's all a part of the conversation, no doubt. So Brics came up in that conversation because, level set for the audience, right? Anybody not really aware. So Brics is a coalition of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and about 30 plus other nations that are in the process of formally joining. And then another 100 plus, 159 plus that are actually in the process of looking to join Brics. So really the rest of the known world almost, right, is looking to move into Brics.
Yep.
And that system will obfuscate and work around SWIFT's payment network. And I believe that's intentional. And to Molly Elmore's credit, she's even floated the idea that maybe one day at the end of all of this, the United States joins Brics too. And the whole thing becomes the new system. And I think that is certainly worth consideration. And what I would say is that understanding that the United States is the laggard in this space, understanding that the United States is the superpower, it is the largest economy of the world, and it happens to hold the position of the global reserve currency as well, I could see why they're last. I could see where they're putting themselves in a position going, hey, we're the ones that have the most to lose here. It's our dollar at risk. Everyone else get on the new system, and we will do the 11th hour at the, the final stroke of the clock. We'll come into this thing and bring the largest economy and our dollar digitized and the rest of the known traditional markets tokenized. And that, I believe, becomes the catalyst for this market to truly take off. But to your point about Brics, if Brics represents the rest of the known world, essentially, then I look at things like Stellar, Ripple, Circle, and Paxos as pillars to the infrastructure of the United States presence in the digital economy. Your thoughts? Let's start with Vandell.
Yeah. I think, I think Brics is working on some big things in the background as we speak. I think the U.S. is intentionally sitting behind the sidelines. That's my personal belief, because I think they're trying to prepare and foster an environment to create more regulations for the crypto and blockchain sector. And I think they're fostering an environment to offer a solution which will allow us to make this transition and go more digital. That's my personal opinion. And I believe that Brics, ultimately, regardless whether they use XRP or not, I think that what's taking place right now is nations all around the globe are ultimately they agreed on the same outcome. That's my opinion. I believe they're probably taking different paths to get there, but ultimately they agreed on one thing, and that's the digitization and tokenization of all assets. So that's the way I see it unfolding. I just think they're taking different paths, going different routes, but ultimately they're going to get to the same place, and this will be globally. And it has to do with tokenization. The ultimate goal is to tokenize everything, all assets, and that ties into digital IDs and the financial instrument that they're going to utilize for payments as a bridge currency for moving value from A to B. I think XRP is one of the options on their list. There's other potential options that meet the criteria. There's XLM. There's, as well as XLM, there's another one. There's Velo, but ultimately they're heading towards the same direction. That's how I see it unfolding.
Vandell?
Versan.
I'm sorry, Versan. Excuse me. Are you twins as well as brothers?
It happens all the time. It's okay.
Are you twins as well as brothers, by the way? I meant that.
Vandell's my older brother.
We're not twins. No.
Oh,
we
I
look
love how
like
he put that on you too. He's like, no, he's my older brother.
He's the more handsome one.
No, that's not true, man. Anyways, thank you.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Right.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the Brics. The first thing I think it's important to understand that I want people to understand what the Brics really is. It's not just a collective of countries seeking to distance themselves from the US dollar. It's really seeking to distance themselves also from the harmful influence of ideologies that we see that are leading to societal breakdown. We're seeing individuals who should be held accountable instead of being integrated into society, which is just one of the examples of the dysfunction that the Brics nations are trying to avoid. So I want people to understand that there's a lot more at stake here than people realize. The conversation is not just about financial technology. It's about the fight for freedom, the fight for truth, compassion, love. These are things we need in this world. And people who think beyond the noise and beyond the misinformations like you see on some of the platforms, we have to focus on the real issues at hand. And I don't think that's widely discussed enough. Now, as far as the Brics nations, they launched a blockchain initiative called Project mBridge. Is there any way you can pull that document up real quick?
I think that I can.
Can continue?
There you go. We got it right here.
All right. So if you now, many people have seen this document, right? But there are times when we would say like, oh, the Brics currency, Brics nations are using the XRP ledger. Well, if you read this document, the devil's in the detail. It says for the first half of 2018, the Bank of Russia is initiative laboratory conducted research on testing the possibility of a cross-border settlements using the Ripple platform. Now, if you go a little bit below, it says right here, I'm so sorry, guys, talk about building upon. Here it is. Okay, Ripple platform can be considered as the basis for starting work on creating a system of cross-border settlements. So what I'm trying to say here and speculate is that it would seem that this new project mBridge that they've built is actually leveraging the XRP ledger as its very foundation. And that's where the whole idea of interoperability comes into play. The ability for central banks, financial institutions, and even individuals to communicate across different ledgers seamlessly. And Ripple, they utilize XRP, which is built on the protocol designed to enable this kind of global financial communication. So whether the Brics nations use mBridge to transact in XRP or not is also irrelevant, because XRP is already positioned as a global reserve settlement mechanism. And I don't think people really understand how this is all interconnected. It is actually the source of liquidity. So about this blockchain initiative called Project mBridge, which I've discussed many times with Andy Schectman on and off record as well, the crux of the matter really lies in the intersection between digital assets and physical assets as well. And Ripple's protocols are being adopted by key institutions with Brics nations. Interestingly, the Central Bank of India, the Central Bank of Brazil, these are all Brics nations. So it seems like everybody is using this technology, and it would seem also that the West will eventually, like I said earlier, will get cornered into using this technology. And like you said, Molly Elmore mentioned how the West might follow in the Brics footsteps. And guess what? No surprise, some states in America are already trying to make gold legal tender. They've already taken the necessary steps to go in that direction. So I think that's very important to just put it out there and share with people. So those are my thoughts.
I think it's and a great thought it is. Funny you should bring up mBridge, because I go on about this all the time. And I know that we are speculating that mBridge and the XRP ledger could be tied in. Well, speculation is getting ready to be set aside. We're getting ready to listen to James Wallace from Ripple, the head of XRP Central Bank Engagement, is going to tell you that in fact mBridge is one of the or XRP Ledger is one of the pilots of mBridge. Now, whether it's the only pilot or not, we don't know. But listen to this exchange.
Right, we're using the same technology that is with the XRP Ledger. The token would be the CBDC, right? So the central bank would actually create their own token, a digital euro, digital dollar, whatever the market is, and that becomes the digital asset.
So that becomes a digital asset. Keep listening.
The native coin.
The native coin, yeah. Now, where XRP could come into play potentially is when you're looking at cross-border CBDC. So when you have a digital dollar and you have a digital, real, or digital pound, you obviously need to have some way to interact cross-border.
Listen.
So I think the BIS call this a multi-CBDC model. One of the ideas is you use a sort of a neutral bridge currency to go from one to the other, similar to the model I explained earlier, with our on-demand liquidity.
He just explained that one of the pilots of mBridge is the XRP ledger, with XRP as a neutral bridge asset. Listen to the last part of this clip.
But the core offering really is not XRP. There's no XRP involved. It's the native token. It is the CBDC.
And stable coins, because it's the tokenized instruments of value, which is where the best incentive is no incentive comes from. Because in order to make a market, you're not forced to use XRP the way you're forced to use Ethereum or some other token on a network. You only use that token if it's the best path scenario for settlement, which means that over time, when you plug the world into the world's decentralized exchange, which is the XRP ledger, you start pairing it to everything that is pairable, because it's all been tokenized. That's what all the money means. It doesn't mean all the pennies in your couch. It means all the possible pairings in the world. And that long tail set of pairings on the back is where XRP will begin to be able to make markets like never before in history, because we haven't had the technology to do so. Your thoughts?
Yeah, real quick, if I could just add something before my brother does.
Yeah.
And this is why it's so important for people to understand that XRP is still a key player in all of this, because it's providing the liquidity that is necessary for all stablecoins, including gold-backed ones. And that's something we can talk about here shortly. But it's very interesting because if you look at what these markets are doing, right, they are turning to the financial technologies, the fintech sector, like XRP specifically, for stability, because fiat currencies are becoming unstable. And this just indicates that these stable coins are going to be the key to stabilizing the economy moving forward, something that has been perpetuated by the IMF. And we can talk about that in a bit too. But let my brother finish his thoughts.
Yep.
Yeah, so you were talking about assets. So for example, the derivatives market. So stocks, bonds, commodities, cryptocurrencies, interest rates, market indices. And the thing is, with the derivatives market, it's supposedly estimated to be worth over $1 quadrillion currently. Now, what's even more interesting is that 9 of the largest banks have more than $220 trillion in derivative exposure, which is humongous. Now, the thing is, one XRP, how could it possibly be less than 2 or 3 digits if they're going to be targeting that amount of money around the globe? It's just something to think about. And that's why I believe it's extremely undervalued, because cross-border payments, I think, is it's just one area that they're focused on, but it's not the ultimate end goal.
I agree. And I think it's a valid point. And, just coming back to this, like the James Wallace clip here and everything that we're talking about, we're the liquidity to the world. What we're talking about is a brand new monetary system. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So in order to bring that confidence together, one of the things that I've noticed is that whether it's myself or digital asset investor, we've always believed that there is a combination, because there's, in the gold world, everyone's a gold bug and they're negative against crypto. And in the crypto world, everyone's a positive on Bitcoin and then negative against metals and gold. But you guys are very similar to digital asset investor and myself, who also feel that it is a combination of these things is where we're going. And I feel that that has been a very important perspective to note, because it won't be just one or the other to win them all. So let's talk about this angle in introducing new payment methods and rails and value protocols, which we've been talking about all this time. But isn't it true that we're going to have to see some kind of gold revaluation to bring confidence to the monetary system again, and to get them to use the value protocols? What are your thoughts there? Let's start with Versan up top first.
Well, I think for sure, and this is something Andy Schectman has talked about as well, there's going to be the intersection between metals and the technology, digital assets, right? With blockchain, people have to understand that you can fractionalize and tokenize gold, physical gold. And what's happening is that the International Monetary Fund, the Bank of International Settlements, they have spoken that if we're going to have digital money, it has to have some backing behind it. People also need to, you hear a lot of this talk about that we're in a constitutional crisis right now, which we are. I understand that. But in the Constitution, it says that gold is legal tender as well. So if this can tie us even into the election and what's happening with Trump and Judy Shelton and things that have been discussed off record, if we are really seeing a revitalization of the Constitution, there will have to be gold backing. Gold is really, it is the backing for any currency. So what I see happening going with the Bank of International Settlements and their Basel III requirements, which is very important. You have to understand that the central banks are mandatory to have significant gold reserves in their vaults for this new system. Apparently, this has to be implemented by 100% by 2025, whatever the case is. But XRP, I think, is going to act more of a digital gold that will enable the central banks to meet the obligations and requirements for Basel III that lack the physical gold reserves to meet those requirements by Basel III. So I think XRP is really going to position itself not just as a way to stabilize currencies and provide liquidity as well, but also to fill in the gap where traditional gold reserves fall short.
Yeah, Vandell?
Yeah, so since 2010, after we had the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, central banks have been net buyers of gold, breaking records on an annual basis. And they're still accumulating till today. Now, I think it would be extremely naive to think they're accumulating all this gold to just devalue it even more or um, have no reason for all this accumulation.
Yeah.
It makes sense. They understand that the world is transitioning, the monetary reset is going through a shift, and they understand that blockchain technology and digital assets are going to play a key component in the new financial and monetary system. So that's why they're accumulating gold. It's not just because they know the dollar is losing its buying power. They've known that since before 2008 because they understand fiscal and monetary policy. They know when you add M2 money supply, you add more, you inject liquidity, you do quantitative easing. They know that your currency, your fiat currency, debases, it loses value. So they've known this since day one. This is the big Ponzi scheme of the monetary system, you know? So the reason they've been accumulating gold is not just to hedge against a failing dollar, but it's to give them choices and put them on the front end of the table where they have the ability to make decisions. And the reason is because gold is going to play a key role in the updated financial and monetary system. And it's going to be tied in some fashion directly to digital assets on the blockchain. So regardless if they do tokenize gold, which ultimately will happen, there's no doubt about it. I just want people to understand that I think there's this big misconception that people have, especially in the crypto space, thinking that gold is going to never be as valuable as it once was, or it's not going to maintain its value, or it's going to lose its value potentially, since we're going to a digital blockchain based financial system. But no, that's 100% inaccurate. Gold is still going to maintain its value. And as a matter of fact, gold will likely increase significantly more in value when the system does get closer to the end of the shift. And that's the gold reevaluation part in there, because they have to restructure the debt. They have to continue accumulating gold, which they have been doing since 2010. They've been net buyers. That hasn't changed. So why on earth would they be doing that? And if they know we're going to a digital blockchain-based system, do you see what I mean?
I do.
This is where the connection between digital assets and gold, precious metals, baskets of commodities, including precious metals, come into play. And an excellent visualization I posted a long time ago was 10 kilograms of gold would buy you an average home in 1929. Fast forward till today, 2024, 10 kilograms of gold will buy you 2 average homes today. So do you see how the value, when it's measured in gold, keeps up over all these decades, fast forward till today?
Absolutely.
And I don't think that's going to change, even though it might be tokenized. It will be tokenized.
Absolutely. So, Verson, let me ask you a question, and you can obviously chime in on this, wrap up on this question too as well. But it's been said, and it's been floated by some of the industry leaders, even including Brad Garlinghouse, has said he believes that legislation will get passed for crypto out of the Senate before the election on November 5th. And he's not the only one to say it. There's other industry leaders that are suggesting this now, which really plays into the idea that this current administration with Harris is going to pull some kind of rope-a-dope move, right? Yep. As they're still allowing Gensler to chase down all of the people in crypto right now. And then in the 11th hour, to get the momentum going to the election booth, they're going to put legislation through. I just want to ask you, do you think that's going to happen, or is it going to take a new administration to get it done?
Well, that's a very challenging question because it's very unpredictable. But as a trends forecaster as well, I really think this all has to tie with the United States dollar being based on debt. And what we're seeing is the whole system is really collapsing.
Yep.
And again, whether we adopt these technologies now or later, I think it's inevitable, however they want to play this out. But this ties us back into abandoning the gold standard. We essentially handed control over to the central banks and the military industrial complex, which gave them the means, the power to maintain this criminal enterprise, or whatever you want to call it. So the shift has systemically drained wealth from the people and what many others refer as the great taking. In fact, we've been living through this since the 2020 pandemic and even way before that. So the problem that we're facing is it's collapsing. There are also emerging technologies capable to undermine this corrupt structure. So I think what they're trying to do, like my brother said earlier, they're buying time. They're trying to co-opt it any way they can. And I think that ties us into the whole ETHgate thing and whatever happened over there. And who knows, right? But this really boils down to a new monetary system is emerging. The powers that be, they want to keep control in some way, form, or fashion. And that's, I think, what we're seeing play out in real time. Obviously, the election is going to have a lot to do with this. But then there's that narrative behind Trump as well, that he's considered actually taking us back to a gold standard. So who knows what's really happening? I don't like to speculate that far off, but there's no doubt that this Camilla Biden-Harris administration are absolutely corrupt, man. And they're going to, if you vote a vote for Camilla Harris, I hate to say this, but it's the truth, is basically a vote for giving away your freedom or whatever's left of it, because they've taken everything from us. They've taken our ability to critically think for ourselves. They're trying to take your children. They took in your money, your savings, and the only thing left we have is our voice. So people need to rise up, speak up, and tell people how they feel about all of this. But I know I got way off topic, guys.
Actually,
it's just I don't really have an answer.
Yeah.
I just want people to not get caught up in meaningless debates, missing the real bigger picture. In reality, we're living through a grand narrative. It's a staged show while other people are focused on other things. And I know this is off topic, like electric cars, which is another topic entirely. The real issues are remaining unaddressed. And it's time to really cut through the bullshit, the noise, and focus on what can genuinely make this world a better place. And last thing, I said this to you earlier, is that the real change is going to start with us. It begins with human action and emotion. We're going to shape the way the future should unfold. But there are still very powerful individuals who have no emotion whatever, no love, who still control all the influences in the system that we're subjected to. So no matter how dire the situation becomes, my final message is really to the people that we need to think outside the box, just like my brother and I do, and so do you guys. It's the only way we're going to see through the bullshit and understand what's really happening behind the scenes.
I completely agree. And I'm going to throw it to Vandell to final thought this thing, and then I'll wrap it too. Go ahead, Vandell.
Yes, I absolutely agree with Versan. So this year we have a lot of things coming up. The debt refinance cycle every 4 to 5 years. Okay, we have the elections coming up. Bitcoin halving already took place. We're anticipating a crypto bull run, especially for altcoins and other digital assets. So we have a lot of things lining up right now, and it's not a coincidence. I personally believe that there is a high probability, based on my analysis, looking at from a macro perspective, that there is some engineered, orchestrated event around the corner. And the reason I believe that is because of the reasons I just outlined. And one of them is the debt refinance cycle and the debt, as my brother said. The debt just today hit it's now over $35 trillion, US national debt. So the dollar is dealing with some serious issues right now in terms of buying power. So every 4 to 5 years, the debt has to be refinanced in the system, okay? So what we're seeing right now is the reason stocks are hitting all-time highs, that US equity markets are still floating. This is because they are artificially inflating these markets with spending and issuing debt. And it's making its way into the into the US equities markets. When something starts to break, this happened in 2020. This is the sequence it flows in if you look at it on the global liquidity index from a macro perspective. In 2020, we were having a repo. We were having serious issues with the system. So right after that, that's when the liquidity was injected into the system, whether it's through stimulus, spending, issuing more debt. And then we had our bull run, okay? So right now we're facing very similar issues as we speak right now. And the debt needs to be refinanced. We're getting closer to the elections. We're in the election cycle. So looking at the global liquidity index, what I'm seeing is that every time there's a crisis that takes place, obviously, I believe it's 100% measured, controlled, and orchestrated right after a massive liquidity gets injected into the markets to save the markets from fully collapsing. This happened in 2009, 2008. This happened in 2020, and they covered and justified the excessive stimulus and money printing. They justified it with a very good excuse, and that was the whole lockdown situation that was taking place. They have to come up with an excuse to justify their actions of creating more money and putting it into the system. And I think that's going to happen again. And I believe that's going to be the real kickoff to start this bull market altcoin season cycle. And I don't think we're there yet. I think we're just floating around still, but it's around the corner. This would be the end of quantitative tightening, and they're going to move back into quantitative easing, injecting more liquidity into the markets. And this is all visible on the charts. So everything's lining up perfectly, in my opinion, but they could pull something to answer your question. I believe they will.
I wouldn't put anything past them. That is for sure. One thing I will say, just to like wrap the idea, you guys have brought up so many great points. I couldn't just grab just one, but I'm going to grab just one because I couldn't touch them all. Moving from a debt-based system to a multipolar asset-backed system. Moving from Keynesian economics to Austrian economics, right? Moving from that debt-based measure to an asset-backed measure. It's clear that that's what's happening here to me, right? Because we're watching it start at a foundational level with stable coins. Because with stable coins issuance, whether it's a stable coin that represents a bar of gold, an ounce of gold, or a stable coin that represents a barrel of oil or a half a barrel, or whether it's a stable coin that represents a pegged dollar to someone's country. These are the instruments, along with central bank digital currencies, that will be the vehicles that allow the system to operate and move. And because we see them moving to the introduction of stable coins, that they must be 1-to-1 or a surplus. This is the transition at a fundamental level that tells me we're moving away from the debt-based system, because currently right now they do fractional lending. They do not have to hold they don't have to hold 1-to-1 or a surplus, right? So forcing all of the issuers in the future of this new system to hold 1-to-1 or a surplus is, I think, in my opinion, the grand step of moving the banks and the legacy systems to be completely accountable, and no more is a dollar just backed by the full faith and confidence of a government, right? It needs to have assets. It needs to have commodities and the reserves of it to be backed 1-to-1 or to a surplus. This is how you get the world living above board, to the letter. No one's treated different, right? It's a start. What are they going to do to try to manipulate it for themselves in the future? I know they've got ideas, but go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to touch on what my brother said really shortly, and then what you said, Brad. So first of all, as a consequence to what my brother was explaining about this debt-based system, us, the people, we are forced as a result to pay more taxes, see higher inflation, which is conveniently disguised as inflation, really. Inflation, taxation is inflation without representation, or is it the other way around? Anyways.
It works.
So the core issue is basically that we left the gold standard, tangible assets, like you said. So a debt crisis, the minute you understood that, and it took me a while to understand this, but the minute we took gold off the dollar, that's when a debt crisis and a currency crisis was inevitable. It was going to happen already. Even Ron Paul said this to Bernanke when they were in the 2008 financial crisis, saying that the Fed would eventually implode on itself. So these are all intricately linked. Gold used to provide stability, and not just stability, it limited the power of the central banks. It limited the power of the military industrial complex, particularly in terms of taking us to war. And that's really how all of this is interconnected. So my thought on the stablecoin thing, I'll be real fast.
Well, let me ask you a question before you go there,
ahead.
because I don't want to break your thought, but you brought up something really good, and I want to ask you this. So with that limited power, because that's exactly why they abandoned the gold standard, so the Fed could have more power and not be handcuffed to the gold standard. So with that point you're making, and understanding that the new infrastructure is requiring everybody to be 1-to-1 or surplus with issuances, sounds
Level
like
playing field.
a level playing field, a new day, and reestablishing this, getting away from this fractional business. So if that's the case, are we going to see the Fed finally handcuffed and obey the rules even with a gold revaluation, or are we going to see the repatriation of the Federal Reserve note into a U.S. Treasury note that's backed by something like gold and other assets?
Yes. I think either one is possible. But as far as the central banks, the Federal Reserve, I think they are losing power. They're losing control. Eventually, the crisis, this is something Gareth Soloway talked about, and that's why we brought him on the show, that the central bank, and this already makes sense, but the Federal Reserve was going to eventually implode on itself, and the crisis would get too big for them to even handle. So the Treasury Department would have to get involved to some degree. Something like that is going to unfold. So it's healthy speculation, but something like that could for sure play out. And like you said, stable coins, I think, are the most important thing in this space. And the thing is, what is driving these stable coins? What is stabilizing these stable coins? What is providing the liquidity necessary for all of these stable coins, including if there was a gold-backed stable coin, which has been touted by the World Gold Council. Interestingly, the World Gold Council works hand in hand with the Bank of International Settlement. Well, interestingly, the Bank of International Settlements is working with Ripple using XRP. Rick Rule talked about this on our show as well. And my point, though, is that they are also associated with the IMF. And the IMF is associated with the World Bank. But who's the parent organization to the World Bank? It's the United Nations. The United Nations. I mean, look how interconnected these systems are. And they're the ones talking how stable coins are necessary, and including gold-backed stable coins. This was touted by the World Gold Council. So a gold-backed stable coin for central banks to use would have to drive its liquidity from XRP itself. That's how XRP will consolidate the global financial system. I mean, it's so easy to see this now. It's undeniable. The connections are all there. And then, of course, you got your Bitcoin maxis who don't want to, they're too reluctant not to do the research. They don't want to sit down and ask the right questions. And I've tried speaking to them. Vindel and I tried to get Mark Moss on the show once. Wasn't he like rude to us, Vindel? It's kind of funny. Anyways. So we're trying to have these discussions and tell people, like, what do you say to this and this and this? And it's like right out there in the open. Anyways.
I get the frustration. Yeah, go ahead. Vindel.
It's just funny. It's comical at this point.
Yeah, this whole idea and this concept of a level playing field, I think it's being the way I see it is, I don't think we're gonna fully have the feds and the shadow government figures handcuffed in this new system. Okay, personally, I think they're the architects of the new system. Okay, they control the central banks. They're the elite families, the royal bloodlines. They are the wealthiest people in the world. They are the ones who created the intelligence agencies abroad and in the US. And they are the ones who control BlackRock, okay? They all work together. The government is in bed with Wall Street, and they have agreements that we have no access to, okay? But it's very clear what's happening here is there is a shift taking place in the financial system because the old system is dying. They know they have to make that jump. So what they're doing is they're rigging international laws. They're setting up policies. And remember, who funds and controls the politicians? Sure, you can say APAC and, certain individuals behind the scenes, but the truth is it's the elite families. It's the multi-billionaires, and a lot of them are shadow figures. And when I say that, it's because they're not in the headlines, they're not the mainstream news very often. You don't even know who they are and what their names are, but you know of them. And those are the ones that are really in charge of the system currently. And I don't see why they would have any interest in having less control as the transition takes place. And that's why I believe they're going to orchestrate some sort of crisis in order to onboard people onto the new system. Now, I still believe 100% that digital assets, crypto, blockchain technology is going to be a cornerstone and so important, the foundation of the new financial system. And I believe that if you own some of these protocols, a piece of the network, the digital assets that will be here for the new system and be used, that you're going to make tremendous life-changing wealth. And you're going to have much more options in life and opportunities than those who did not participate. That's how I see it. Almost equivalent to the dot-com bubble with the tech innovation era, but this is on a global scale and it's just tremendously greater, in my opinion. People will have more choices and options and wealth that will emerge from this transition if you own these assets. But I don't believe that the shadow figures that are the architects of the system and the IMF, the BIS, the central banks, I don't believe that they're just going to give all their power away and just sit back with their hands tied doing nothing. I believe that's why they set up private and public ledgers. I believe they're setting up the system. Yeah.
I love the effects, man.
Yeah, you're damn right. So well said, Vandal. I had to give you the fireworks. It was so good. Verson, give us the final thought and take us out of here. That was so spot on, my friend.
Well, I think my brother, Vandal and I, we discuss a lot of this stuff privately, right? We don't want to anger anyone and get people to have their hopes thrown away. But the truth is, the only way we're going to really see change, like I said, is if the people really take the action. In the old days, when the king did something that the people didn't like, they went and hung him, or they took him to the guillotine. And what I'm trying to say is that would keep tyrants in check from the people. And I'm not saying we need to do that again. But the people need to change for change to really come, and no one's changing. In fact, technology has made people more lazy. AI is going to dominate the workforce, make people useless. They've created a situation where central bank digital currencies will most likely be the new currency for the average day, working man and woman. But my brother did say that they won't give control. He's right about that. What they're going to do is level the playing field for a new 1%. And that's global leaders getting together, almost like a company going public. They're sitting together, they're setting the stage for their new monetary system. And that's why I've told people it's going to be two-tier. In fact, there's a document from the IMF Trust Bridges where it talks about how it's a two-tier. One is closed, one is open. One is open by tangible assets too. The closed one is what others want to call a UBI, universal basic income, where you really have no freedom. So like my brother said, you got to take action and position yourself, because even on the Turning Point, we call it, it's a new show we started. I call it the final wealth transfer. And the reason I say final is because I'm talking about all value is going digital. If that is the case, whatever's in that new system when it goes live is in that system. Whatever's out of the system probably can't get back on it, so who knows? I think it's the greatest wealth transfer in human history. And you can be part of this transformative revolution in money, or you could get left behind like most people will. There's no different. Natural selection is a real thing too.
It sure is, and that's so well said. Black Swan Capitalist, Verson, Vandal, I want to thank you both. Don't go anywhere. That's your week in review. Have a great weekend, everybody.